Hi, this is the Philosophical Angle program, and I am your host, Chris Angle. And the purpose of the Philosophical Angle is to examine the nature of concepts and ideas in current media. I'm the author of 5 books on philosophy, known as the Detmar-Haskell Dialogues, and they are the nature of aesthetics, the nature of ethics, the nature of truth, the philosophical equations of economics, and the most recent one, the nature of the political left and right. And these books are available anywhere books are sold. And the nature of aesthetics and the latest one, this one, the nature of the political left and right, are available as audiobooks. If you do a search for me, be sure to use my full name, Christopher, as opposed to Chris. Christopher Angle, as there's another fellow out there with the same name. Please hit the like button, subscribe, and comment. And this week, we're going to talk about Iran. And specifically, we'll talk in general about what is an ally and how do we know who is an ally for the United States. And so, as everybody knows, we're in a military conflict with Iran, and also the president is not happy with Europe, as NATO didn't want to help with bringing any military assets to help with our conflict with Iran. After all, what we're doing to Iran helps Europe as well. It helps Europe in that it lessens the danger of nuclear blackmail by Iran. And additionally, and to even a greater extent, it helps the Middle East in the same regard. Who wants to be the brunt of Iranian dictates? Nobody. And no country would want to have to be the subject of the directives of an Iranian Ayatollah. I think everybody can agree that they wouldn't want to be the subject of direct orders of a Iranian fundamental theocratic dictator. Also, we know that we'd rather be friends with Europe. Also, we know that we'd rather be friends with certain countries in Asia. Yet, we also know that we must be leery of being friends with certain countries in Asia. So, how do we make this decision as to who should be our friends politically and who should be our enemies? How do we make the decision? So it comes to mind that we need to understand what is the nature to the following question. What is an ally? What is a friend? What is a comrade? How do we determine this? We need to answer this question. We need to understand that certain countries should be our friend and certain countries should be our adversary. Or at least one with which we should be careful in our cooperative actions. Well, in order to make this decision, we need to understand what is an ally, a friend, a comrade, or in the opposite sense, an adversary. How do we know this? Well, luckily, you're tuned into the Philosophical Angle podcast, and so let's answer this question. An ally is another country that has the same or similar priorities that we do. And conversely, the more our priorities become diversified away from a similarity, the more it becomes difficult to cooperate with that country. And now we have to define priority. And a priority is a piece of knowledge that has importance to us. And we will have importance, and it will have importance to us because it will lead us, supposedly, to goodness in our lives. So when a priority is congruent with others, it becomes easier for the participants to cooperate. And we want to cooperate to be able to produce goodness through the production of goods and services. And the results of the cooperation bring goodness and allows us to bring ourselves up away from misery, consternation, conflict, and war. And cooperation brings us the ability to be ethical to each other. And we would be ethical because ethics is the appropriate dispensation of respect. Biology instills in us the idea of respect because it allows us to cooperate. And we cooperate in order for us to produce goods and services, which brings goodness to our lives. The opposite of cooperation is conflict, and of course, conflict is inimical to goodness. Thus, life attempts to avoid conflict whenever possible. But sometimes when priorities of nations diverge to such an extent, conflicts or war develop between nations. But it can also develop between corporations or individuals even. So it is natural that we seek others with the same priorities, which allows us to cooperate. The more our priorities are aligned, the more the will to cooperation develops. So in the political scene, how is it that a country like the United States would choose an ally? Well, we would choose one with the same priorities, such as freedom for its citizens. In other words, those countries that have the similar priority of allowing the individual citizen of their country to be free, to do as they wish, as noted in our Constitution and in the Bill of Rights, would be a country that would become a friend of ours. In other words, they would become friends because both have the priority of extending freedom to their constituent citizens. The opposite of political freedom is political control, and those countries that determine a large degree of control within their societies can be labeled totalitarian. So the more a country becomes totalitarian, the more their priorities diverge away from the priorities of a country like the United States. These countries with the priorities of freedom, such as Western Europe, will likely become cooperative friends of the United States because of the similarity of the priorities. Other countries like Japan and Taiwan would also be friendly to us because of the similarities of priorities there also. The priorities of allowing your constituents to be free to do as they wish is important to be able to develop a great economy. Iran is a totalitarian, theocratic country. Iran has as its basis the Quran and its belief that the leader of the Islamic world should be a direct descendant of the original prophet's family, and this is called a Shia. Other Muslims who want the Quran to be their guiding dictate in their society, but do not have the requirement that the leader of their society be a direct descendant of Muhammad, is called a Sunni. So, why is it that the United States or countries such as Western Europe and Japan and Taiwan should have the priority of freedom as opposed to totalitarianism important in their outlook? It is important to us and others because freedom produces wealth and profit and goodness for their society. And why is this? It is because freedom produces a greater amount of knowledge than does totalitarianism. And why is this? It is because freedom is the creation of a priority and then the effectuation of a priority. And a priority is a piece of knowledge that is important to us. So in a free society, there are more priorities created and then effectuated. And since the effectuations of these priorities bring goodness into our lives, the society that has freedom as its modus operandi will have greater creativity in the production of goods and services and have more goodness within their society than those societies of totalitarianism. Each one of us, when we create a priority and then effectuate it, we do it because we think that there will be a reward and goodness will come to our lives through the effectuation of our priorities. We do this because the first principle of economics, and really of life itself, is that all life does that which is good for it and continually does that which is good for it. So when we make and then effectuate a priority, we are making a sacrifice to obtain a reward. And we perceive that a reward as being good for us. And so when freedom is abundant in society, we are constantly effectuating priorities that will bring goodness to us. And the makeup of a priority, as we just mentioned, is a sacrifice to obtain a reward. And the makeup of the sacrifice is the time required to effectuate the priority, the effort, the risk and opportunity involved, and the knowledge that is needed to effectuate the priority. We put together these variables to acquire the reward. And thus, freedom brings societal wealth through the accumulation of knowledge. Therefore, as Iran is controlled by religious, fundamental mullahs, they do not produce as much knowledge and technology to be able to advance society as much as the United States or other Western or free societies do. And so, it is that those countries that have greater freedom are in control, are in general, those countries that have more goodness to be enjoyed by the denizens of their societies. Thanks for joining me on the Philosophical Angle program, and be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you, and see you next time.